Welcome, where every episode is an induction into the Hip Hop Hall of Fame. 1. The Engineer of the One. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, James Brown wasn't just a soul singer, he was a rhythmic disciplinarian rewriting the laws of American music. Before he became the most sampled human being in history, he was a kid from the Georgia woods who survived the Great Depression by dancing for pennies on street corners. That hunger stayed in his bones. He didn't just want to lead a band, he wanted to command a sonic army with military precision. In 1965, with Papa's Got a Brand New Bag, the pivot happened. James Brown shifted the entire weight of black music from the 2 and the 4 to the 1. It was a musical coup d'etat. By placing the explosive emphasis on the first beat of every measure, he created a circular groove that felt infinite. He traded the predictable structures of the radio era for a hypnotic loop that demanded movement. He was the first to realize that a drum break wasn't just a bridge, it was the heart of the record. He brought a blue-collar grit to the stage that turned his performances into high-stakes rituals. He wasn't just a singer, he was the first human sequencer. He proved that the groove wasn't a background element, it was the primary directive. 2. The breakbeat revolution. If hip-hop is a skyscraper, the drum breaks of James Brown are the bedrock. In the 1970s, as the Bronx was reinventing itself and the first DJs were wiring up sound systems in the parks, they weren't looking for pop ballads. They were hunting for the Godfather's percussion. When masters like DJ Kool Herc and Grandmaster Flash searched for the perfect beat, they found it in the sweat-soaked, gritty vinyl of James Brown and his JBs. Records like Funky Drummer, Cold Sweat, and The Payback became the universal language of the street. Clyde Stubblefield's 8-bar drum solo in Funky Drummer became the most important rhythmic DNA in the history of the genre. Somebody had to provide the raw material for the digital age, and James Brown did it with unintentional prophecy. He proved that a single breakbeat had the kinetic energy to power an entire global movement. He didn't just influence the sound, he defined the battle aesthetic. His grunts, his sharp shouts, and his staccato delivery became the manual for how an MC commands a crowd. He proved that the voice could be used as a percussion instrument, a technique that every pioneer from Rakim to Chuck D would eventually perfect. He set the standard of excellence for what it meant to give the drummer some. 3. The evolution of the hardest working man. Many legends are content to let their old trophies speak for them, but James Brown was the first to validate the new school in real time. In the mid-1980s, when the mainstream media was trying to dismiss hip-hop as a passing fad, the Godfather did the unthinkable. He walked into the studio with Africa Bambaataa for the track Unity. It was a landmark achievement in cultural diplomacy, a handshake between the Godfather of soul and the Godfather of hip-hop. He proved that you could grow alongside the culture you helped spark. He transitioned from the R&B titan of the 60s into the sample source icon of the digital era. He used his platform to advocate for economic self-reliance and black ownership, proving that the artist had to be a social powerhouse. He showed the world that his music wasn't just a collection of hits, it was a manifesto for liberation. He paved the way for every independent power player who followed, proving that if you owned your masters and your movement, you could never be sidelined. He showed us that hip-hop wasn't a departure from tradition. It was the electric evolution of the funk. He brought a level of creative discipline to the game that pushed every other musician to their absolute limit. He was the first to show us that Black Pride could be a chart-topping anthem, and that a groove could be a political statement. He redefined the science of the stage by treating every single performance like a life or death struggle. He didn't just give us the beat, he gave us the will to dominate. He proved that no matter how much the technology shifted, the pulse of the streets would always be synced to his heartbeat. 5. The induction of the source. We induct James Brown not just for the hundreds of records he cut, but for the foundation he provided for everything we call hip-hop. He was the first to prove that the drum was the most powerful tool in the world, and that a break could change the course of human history. For the one that started the revolution, for the drummers he made into gods, and for being the hardest working man in the history of the universe, we officially induct the godfather of soul, the minister of super heavy funk, James Brown, into the Hip Hop Hall of Fame. Chapter 1. The Evolution of the MC. In 1986, the energy of hip-hop was defined by high-volume, high-energy delivery. MCs were yelling to be heard over massive drum machines. But in a small studio in New York, a young man from Wyandanch, Long Island, named William Griffin, known as Rakim, stepped to the mic and whispered a revolution. He didn't shout. He spoke with a cool, detached, and lethal precision that the culture had never heard. He brought the jazz mentality to the rap vocal. Rakim realized that the microphone was a sensitive instrument, and he treated it like a confidant. He moved away from the simple cat-in-the-hat rhyme schemes of the early 80s and introduced the internal rhyme. He was rhyming words in the middle of the sentence at the beginning and across multiple bars. He was a mathematical genius of the syllable, mapping out his verses like a complex grid. He turned the MC into a lyricist. He proved that you didn't need to yell to command a room. You just needed to be the smartest person in it. He brought a Zen authority to the booth that made every other rapper suddenly sound like they were trying too hard. Chapter 2. The Science of the Sample. Eric B. While Rakim was re-engineering the voice, Eric B. was re-engineering the sound. Before their debut album, Paid in Full, most producers were using drum machines to mimic a beat. Eric B. was a crate digger in the truest sense of the word. He went into the dusty basements of record shops and found the soul that the 808s had missing. He was the first to realize that you could take a bass line from Bobby Bird or a drum break from James Brown and loop it into a hypnotic street-level masterpiece. Together, they created a sound that was heavy but sophisticated. When Eric B. is president and My Melody hit the streets, the industry stood still. The music felt like a late-night drive through a dangerous city. Eric B. proved that the DJ wasn't just a performer. He was a sound designer. He brought the gritty soul back to the digital age. He set the blueprint for the sample-heavy production that would define the entire golden era. He showed the world that the history of black music was a giant toolbox, and he had the key to the chest. Chapter 3. the paid-in-full era, and the business of the image. In 1987, the album Paid in Full was released and it became the Bible of the new school. It wasn't just about the music, it was about the aesthetic. The cover featured Eric B. and Rakim draped in massive custom-made Dapper Dan leather jackets and trucker chains that looked like they belonged in a vault. They weren't dressed like rock stars or fun entertainers. They were dressed like moguls. They brought a street luxury to the Hall of Fame that redefined what success looked like. They were the first to talk about the business of the game with a cold, calculated honesty, thinking of a master plan, 'cause ain't nothing but sweat inside my hand. They turned the struggle for money into a high-stakes intellectual pursuit. They were the first to prove that a rap duo could be cool, dangerous, and genius all at the same time. They influenced an entire generation of business-minded rappers, from Nas and Jay-Z to Snoop Dogg. They proved that the pen was mightier than the sword, and the check was the ultimate trophy. Chapter 4: The Induction of the God MC. We induct Eric B. and Rakim not just for their platinum plaques, but for the DNA they left in the microphone. They are the reason we have lyricism. They are the reason we have sampling. They took the raw energy of the Bronx and gave it the intellect of a scholar and the soul of a jazz musician. For the flow that changed the physics of the rhyme, for the crates that gave the culture its heartbeat, and for being the first to show us that a master plan could change the world. We officially induct thee and the God MC, Eric B. and Rakim, into the Hip Hop Hall of Fame. The Overweight Lover. The Mount Vernon Architect. In the mid-1980s, the rap landscape was shifting toward the hard-edged minimalist sounds of the five boroughs. But just north of the city, in Mount Vernon, a young Dwight Arrington Myers, known to the world as Heavy D, was drafting a different blueprint. He wasn't interested in just being a rapper. He was a performer, a dancer, and a visionary who understood that cool didn't always have to mean cold. Alongside his group, the Boys, G Wiz, Trouble T. Roy, and Eddie F., Heavy D introduced a melodic sophistication to the new school. While others were focused on the grit of the street, Hev was focused on the vibe of the party. He was the first to prove that a man of his stature could move with the grace of a gymnast and the charisma of a Hollywood lead. He didn't just join the culture, he gave it a suave makeover. He showed the world that hip-hop could be big, fine, and fun. He was the bridge between the park jam and the upscale lounge, proving that the heavy aesthetic was about the weight of your talent, not just your frame. The New Jack Swing Revolution. In 1987, Heavy D and the Boys released Living Large, but it was their subsequent work that triggered a crossover explosion. By partnering with a young production genius named Teddy Riley, Heavy D became a primary architect of the New Jack Swing era. This wasn't just a subgenre. It was a sonic bridge that fused the syncopated rhythms of hip-hop with the soulful melodies of R&B. Somebody had to be the first to break the radio barrier, and Heavy D did it with commercial elegance. He proved that rap could be radio-friendly without losing its street credibility. When he dropped hits like We Got Our Own Thang and Now That We Found Love, he wasn't just topping charts, he was expanding the demographic reach of the culture. He turned the trio and DJ dynamic into a high-energy stage show that rivaled the greatest pop acts in the world. He proved that hip-hop had the musicality to dominate the Billboard Hot 100, opening the door for the bad boy and uptown eras that would define the next decade. The executive visionary. Many artists are content to stay in front of the mic, but Heavy D was the first artist turned architect to truly master the boardroom. He moved from the stage to the office of Uptown Records and eventually became the president of the label. He was a culture shifter who had an ear for greatness that extended far beyond his own voice. He was the first to see the star power in a young Puffy Combs. He was the one who encouraged a soulful girl from Yonkers named Mary J. Blige, and he lent his golden touch to the king of pop himself, Michael Jackson, on Jam. He proved that a hip-hop artist could evolve into a global media mogul. He transitioned from the overweight lover of the 80s into the executive powerhouse of the 90s, balancing acting roles on stage and screen with a relentless dedication to the business of music. He showed the industry that the MC wasn't just a guest at the table. The MC could own the building. He paved the way for every artist executive who followed, proving that longevity was the ultimate metric of success. Life in the spotlight isn't without its gravity. In 1990, the group suffered a devastating blow with the tragic passing of Trouble T. Roy. Most groups would have folded under the weight of that grief, but Heavy D used the pain to create soulful resilience. He dedicated the album Peaceful Journey to his fallen brother, turning a moment of deep loss into a universal celebration of life. It was during this era that Hev proved his versatility. He could rhyme over a heavy funk loop 1 minute and a smooth reggae rhythm the next. He brought the West Indian influence to the forefront of the culture long before it became a mainstream staple. He was a global citizen of sound, blending his Jamaican roots with his Mount Vernon upbringing to create a Pan-African groove that resonated from London to Lagos. He never let the industry put him in a box. When the gangsta rap era took over, Hev stayed true to his gentleman's hustle, proving that you didn't have to be a villain to be a vanguard. He remained the coolest man in the room without ever having to raise his voice or drop his standards. The induction of the legend. We induct Heavy D not just for the platinum plaques or the iconic dance moves, but for the spirit he brought to the game. He was the first to prove that hip-hop could be positive without being preachy, and polished without being soft. He brought a level of professionalism and joy to the culture that made the world fall in love with the music all over again. For the flows that made the world dance, for the vision that built empires, and for being the big brother that the culture needed to grow up, we officially induct the overweight lover, the Mount Vernon king, Heavy D, into the Hip Hop Hall of Fame. Chapter 1. The Human Beatbox in the Harlem Renaissance. In the early 1980s, the streets of Harlem were looking for a new energy, and they found it in a teenager named Douglas Davis. While every other DJ was saving up thousands of dollars for a specialized drum machine, Doug E. Fresh realized he could mimic those same frequencies using nothing but his mouth, his throat, and a microphone. He didn't just make noises. He engineered a new science of sound. He became the human beatbox, a title that signaled a revolution in how the world perceived the limits of the human voice. He brought a level of professional showmanship to the stage that hadn't been seen since the days of the Apollo Theater's greatest legends. Dougie Fresh wasn't just a rapper, he was a conductor of energy. He could stand alone on a stage in front of thousands and create a wall of sound that felt as heavy and precise as a full studio production. He took a street corner gimmick and elevated it into a platinum-selling art form. He proved that hip-hop wasn't dependent on technology, it was dependent on the spirit. He was the first to show the world that the body was the ultimate instrument of the culture. Chapter 2: The Get Fresh Crew and La Di Da Di. In 1985, Dougie Fresh assembled the Get Fresh Crew, featuring DJ Barry B, Chill Will, and a young charismatic storyteller from London named Slick Rick. Together, they recorded a double-sided masterpiece that changed the DNA of the music industry, The Show and La Di Da Di. This wasn't just a hit record, it was a cultural blueprint. On The Show, Dougie showcased the military precision of his beatboxing, creating a rhythmic drive that forced the entire world to dance. But it was La Di Da Di that achieved immortality. It was a song with no instruments, just Dougie Fresh's beatboxing and Slick Rick's storytelling. It became the most sampled and quoted song in the history of the genre. Every artist from Snoop Dogg to Beyoncé has paid homage to the La Di Da Di flow. Dougie Fresh proved that simplicity was the ultimate sophistication. He showed the industry that you didn't need a massive budget or a complex arrangement to create a global anthem. You just needed a vibe and a voice. He set the standard for the live performance, proving that an MC should be able to entertain a crowd without any backing tracks at all. Chapter 3: The World's Greatest Entertainer. The true legend of Dougie Fresh is his consistency. He earned the title of the world's greatest entertainer, not because of a single hit, but because of a lifetime of stage dominance. He was the first to master the total performance, blending dance, beatboxing, and lyrical command into a single seamless experience. He brought a clean and positive energy to the golden era, proving that you could be the king of the streets without having to embrace the darkness. He was a pioneer of the crossover, bringing hip-hop into the mainstream of televised entertainment while keeping his street credibility fully intact. He showed the world that a rapper could be a universal star, capable of moving a crowd in Harlem, Hollywood, or London with the same level of intensity. He became the mentor to generations of beatboxers and entertainers, teaching them that the connection with the audience is the most valuable asset an artist can have. He proved that hip-hop was a living, breathing organism that thrived on the physical interaction between the performer and the people. Chapter 4: The Induction of the Showman. We induct Dougie Fresh not just for the innovations of the human beatbox, but for the light he brought to the culture. He was the one who reminded us that hip-hop is a celebration, and that the MC is, first and foremost, a master of ceremonies. He turned the breath into a beat, and the beat into a legacy, for the rhythm that came from within, for the show that never ended, and for being the first to show us that the human voice has no limits. We officially induct the world's greatest entertainer, Dougie Fresh, into the Hip Hop Hall of Fame.